We're sitting here smack dab in the middle of the 2022 offseason. We've been through free agency. We've been through the NFL draft. We just had a rookie minicamp here in Charlotte for the Carolina Panthers. And now we're going through OTAs and then soon rookie or mandatory minicamp. I thought it'd be a great time to talk to Joe Person from The Athletic to talk about what's going on in Carolina and what insights he has on Matt Rhule's job status, a veteran quarterback, and some of the other issues that have occurred legally of Carolina Panthers this offseason. So talk all about all that and more here on this edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday through Friday, your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Nowhere else can you find daily Carolina Panthers coverage in a 30-minute podcast like you can right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure to watch the show and subscribe to the show over on YouTube. And if you can't watch or subscribe to YouTube, shame on you, but that's okay. We're on all the traditional podcasting platforms out there, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, or Stitcher. I ask you to rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of the show. So make sure to go ahead and do that right now. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where every single Friday, like tomorrow, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions. So either at me at Julian Council, DM me at Julian Council, or leave a comment on today's show, or on Monday's show, Tuesday's show, or Wednesday's show from this week, and answer your question tomorrow on the weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. On today's show, Joe Person works for The Athletic, covers the Carolina Panthers, does a fantastic job. Going to talk to him about the Carolina Panthers rookie minicamp, his first look at Matt Corral, what the Panthers' plans might really be for him this upcoming season. Could he actually get an opportunity to start week one? Also, Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo, two names that are still linked to the Carolina Panthers. Might they be here in Carolina over the next couple weeks and months prior to training camp in Spartanburg? We'll find out. I'll ask Joe about that and also ask him about what's going on with Matt Rhule's job status, as the Panthers are apparently eyeing Sean Payton, and Matt Rhule is on a 5-year plan. Do we really have 5 years to sit here and wait to see whether he's the best coach here in Carolina or not? I don't think so, but we'll see. So we'll talk to Joe Person about that here on Locked On Panthers in just a moment. Y'all have been telling me about Built Bar ever since I took over the podcast, and it is by far the best tasting protein bar ever. Imagine dipping your finger into a plastic tub of birthday cake, frosting, and then opening your eyes and realizing that it's actually a Built Bar puff with only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That's what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built Bar. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and I have never had anything like this before. They're available right now, and I can't promise you that they'll be there tomorrow. So get them today at Built.com. And if you haven't tried puffs, I'll let you in on a little secret, because that's what friends do. Puffs are a chocolate-covered marshmallow protein bar. Yeah, you heard me. Delicious flavored marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. Matter of fact, every single Built Bar, Puffs included, is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built Bar, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. Go to Built.com right now and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your first order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, as promised here on Locked On Panthers, he is your beat reporter for the Carolina Panthers for theathletic.com. He is Joe Person. You can follow him on Twitter at Joseph Person, which I'm sure you already do, as he does a fantastic job. As we welcome Joe once again to the show. Joe, good to see you. The last time I ran into you was at the South Carolina, North Carolina baseball game in Uptown at Truist Field, where I was with my girlfriend who's a Gamecock, and I'm, of course, a Tar Heel fan, and that did not turn out to be a very entertaining night for me. But we didn't get a chance to really catch up, so glad we get the chance to do it now. How you doing, man?
Yeah, man. When we went to that game, my daughter, my younger daughter, who's a high school senior, she was a strong lean to the Gamecocks. She has since gone ahead and given the University of South Carolina her commitment. And so I've got to figure out another way to pay for college. So I'll have two in college next year, buddy.
Oh, man. God bless you. I do not ever want to get to that day, which I'm sure will come. But if it does, please, whatever kids I have in the future, get a scholarship. But that's great for her to go down to South Carolina. It is, of course, a school that plenty of people in the Charlotte area, I'm sure plenty of our listeners attended. And I guess that was a great reason. You watched the baseball team beat up on the Tar Heels. Like, hey, I like this. So let me go join the winning team from that day. But let's talk Panthers, man. We had the draft recently. The Carolina Panthers took Ickey Ekwonu at NC State, 6th overall. Finally, as I looked at it, fulfilling the need at left tackle, which they have largely ignored for a long-term solution since Jordan Gross left after the 2013 season, retiring. Does that look like it's going to be what happens, that he's going to be the week 1 starter after seeing what you saw and what you've heard so far after rookie minicamp this past weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you take Ickey Ekwonu at number 6 and with the idea of giving him he's not Brady Christensen. Like Brady, might end up being a terrific player. I mean, they hope he will. But Brady, as you know, when you take a guy in the 3rd round, it's not like rock solid that he's going to be your franchise Jordan Gross type left tackle. Well, when you take one at 6, you go in with that idea. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. I mean, Ickey Ekwonu could end up not being the answer at left tackle. He looks like it, again, it's based on his college tape more than anything I saw last week at rookie camp.
Yeah.
We're out there mostly going against air in shorts and, jerseys and helmets, no pads. But what I did like about him, Julian, is that everything you kind of heard after they drafted him, that they liked him because he's going to be a tone setter. Mm-hmm. I saw that the opening weekend. Like he's the leader of that group. Again, it's rookies, but someone asked him what he wanted to kind of prove over the spring and summer. He said, I want to do just what I've done all my career on tape, and that is work, ethic, he didn't say this, but put guys on their back is sort of how I read it. And
dominate.
I think it was a great pick. Doesn't mean he's going to work out like to be the next Jordan Gross, but I think he's got a hell of a chance to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like a no-brainer. And considering that 2nd year in a row that they've had one side of the ball in that draft to their disposal. Last year in 2021, it was the entire defensive side of the ball that they could go after. They took J.C. Horn, of course. And then this year, somehow, none of the top 3 tackles, which we had talked about for months on end, went into the top 5 ahead of them. And they had their pick, and it took Ickey Ekwonu. So hopefully it works out for him, especially the story of him being a local kid, having gone to Providence Day, and, of course, playing at North Carolina State. Now, you talk about he's not Brady Christensen, because Brady Christensen, the 3rd round pick, you don't look at those guys necessarily as the slam dunk franchise guys. Now the Carolina Panthers have taken a quarterback, trading up to get Matt Corral there in the 3rd round at pick 94. And there's been a lot of conversation. Some people are willing to be patient. That's what it seems the Panthers want to do. While others are like, all right, we've seen enough of Sam Darnold. Let's see Matt Corral start right away. Like, what are your impressions so far of what they really want to do with Matt Corral? Like, are they truly bent on letting him learn the offense and then kind of come into his own? Or is there a chance that he actually might have a chance to start week 1 against Cleveland?
I mean, I guess there's always a chance, but I do get the sense that they want to give him a slow buildup. I mean, he's got a lot of the offense to learn, all of it.
Yeah.
It does help that Sam Darnold's learning a new offense too. But I think, and I made this point in my column Monday with The Athletic, that Matt Corral, no, he's not built like Ben Roethlisberger, and you don't necessarily want him to be Big Ben, but he's a pretty slight kid. He is 6'2", 205, I think 212 at the combine, but the Panthers list him at 205. I mean, I think part of it too, if it ends up being a redshirt year, he'll have the benefit of sitting behind Sam Darnold, or maybe another veteran quarterback that I know you and I are going to end up talking about. But part of that is he getting in an NFL weight program. And again, I'm talking about becoming like some huge muscle-bound freak, but just you saw his style of play at Ole Miss. And part of his appeal for the Panthers was his toughness, his ability to make off-schedule plays with his feet, tucking it and running it. But both Fitter, the night they drafted him, and Rhule this past weekend after rookie camp, both made a point of Corral kind of tries to run defenders over. And the way
not going to work.
You're going to get hurt. And so you either change the way you play or you get a little bigger or some combination.
Yeah, and people used to complain about Cam Newton's playing style. Cam is what, 6'6", 250 or 260, whatever it is. He can do that. He can run through NFL linebackers. That's what Matt Corral cannot do. And I go back to the Tennessee game where he carried the ball like 30 times and was barely able to walk after that. Like, I love the toughness, but yeah, that's not going to work at this level of football. Like, do you think they view him truly as the guy who can be the franchise? Because I've already seen the way too early mock drafts that are out here saying that some of these other quarterbacks, whether we'll see if CJ Stroud, depending on Panthers, of course, land, Bryce Young, and how these guys perform, they've talked about maybe those guys might be on the board and something that Carolina wants to get next year. Do you think they look at him as actually being the long-term answer, or is it more of let's just get somebody in here, develop him, and then see where it goes?
I think it's the latter. I mean, the hope is that he will become that guy, but I don't think, just as you said a minute or two ago with Christensen, and I know it's different positions.
Yeah.
Basically, Matt Corral was taken right around where Will Grier was taken a few years ago in the third round. Grier picked 100, Corral picked 94. Now, Corral was viewed, I think, coming into the draft a little higher, and then ended up sliding. I think off the field concerns definitely played a part in his slide. Again, not that he was a top 10 type guy. I mean, most of the experts, I think Dane Brugler, our guy, had him going late first or second, but ends up going all the way, middle-ish part of the third round. So if they got a value, if they uncovered a Russell Wilson type player, I'm not comparing him to Russell Wilson, but
sure,
that is Fitter's background, right? That Seahawks took Wilson in the third round of the 2012 draft when Fitter was the scouting director. So, but if it turns out he's not, and he's really just sort of a third round type guy, then you took a shot. And yeah, I could see them definitely being in the market in next year's draft, depending on, the problem is too.
Yeah.
Are they going to still stay in this limbo, not just with the guys they're bringing in at the position, but where they're drafting? Because they had the top 10 pick this year. I remember you and I discussing this back before the draft, but this was not the year you wanted to have a top 10 pick where quarterbacks were concerned.
Yeah, and next year might be that year. We have no idea. And the thing is, too, typically in those years where, like last season in 2021, when it's a quarterback-heavy draft, they're going to go in the top 2 picks, like Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. And third pick was Trey Lance to San Francisco, trading those 3 picks to get up there to get him. And then we later on saw Justin Fields, who Chicago traded for, and Mac Jones in New England stayed there and got. Like, that was a deep quarterback class. And yeah, there's a talk about the slippage with Matt Corral, but I mean, the NFL pretty much said how they felt about these quarterbacks by only taking Kenny Pickett there at 20 in the first round and then waiting till the third round to take Ritter, Malik Willis, and then the Panthers trading up to get Matt Corral. So I really do wonder how it'll play out. And you bring up, like, it is Fitter's lineage. Like, they took Russell Wilson, but I think it's Albert Breer who brought it up a couple weeks ago that of the last decade, only 2 quarterbacks that drafted in the third round have gone on to be starters. Now, there's guys in the fourth round like Kirk Cousins and like Dak Prescott who turned out to be good quality starters, made a lot of money, but it's been Russell Wilson and Nick Foles. And Foles is not like Wilson. So really one of those guys turned out to be a franchise quarterback. So I just kind of try to caution people. Now, the one thing I've thought about, let's talk about the veteran quarterback market. If they're really, and you believe this as well, if they truly want to just take it slow and develop him, then Matt Corral is not in here to push Sam Darnold at all. And we've seen PJ Walker. He's not pushing Sam Darnold. So the way I look at it is, all right, this is clearly Sam Darnold's job. And what he did last year and the previous 3 years is not enough for anyone to feel confident, especially this organization, in his ability to carry this team, especially Matt Rhule, who has to win. I've heard a lot about this 5-year plan. I don't believe it. It sounds like crap to me. If you go out there and win 5 games again this year, you're screwed. So you brought it up. Josina Anderson's reported it. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN's reported it. Like, when are they going to bring in another veteran quarterback, if at all, this offseason? Because for me, if they're going to do it, OTAs, mandatory minicamp are coming up the next month. Just do it now instead of waiting and seeing what you have, because clearly what you have is probably not good enough starting off week 1 against the Browns.
Yeah, it's a great question, Julian, and it is multi-layered on a couple of different levels. First of all, the timing. You point out that the quicker you get them in, the better, right? And the problem is, and let's talk about Baker but also talk about Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, Garoppolo is probably not going to throw until August.
Yeah.
But even then, you kind of want him in your building, or at least on Zooms with Sean Ryan and Ben McAdoo, learning the offense, learning the nomenclature and all of that. But the reason they wait, I think, and again, I don't know how long you'd want to wait, but right now they have the leverage. And Cleveland wants to dump Baker Mayfield. We think San Francisco, despite what they're saying, wants to dump Garoppolo. But we know what happened on draft night. Like the Browns were only going to pick up, I think, $2-3 million of Baker's 18, and that wasn't enough for Fitterer.
2-3. Wait, hold on. They only wanted to take $2 million of the $18 million.
2 or 3. I forget the number I heard, and I don't.
That's egregious.
Yeah. Again, and if I'm off there, I'm not off by much because there was something that held that deal up. So anyway, the second part of it. So the timing is part of it. And again, I think the Panthers, and if Seattle's interested, they certainly haven't shown it. But any interested team can kind of afford to slow play it a little bit and see if Cleveland comes up on their price or on on how much they'll take. The second part of this is everyone in the building in agreement on wanting to go after Baker Mayfield? I think Matt Rhule, for the reasons you just documented, it behooves him to want to have a quarterback in addition to Sam Darnold to try to save his job. And we hear it, like you said, I don't know if it's all lip service or whatever, but we heard what Tepper said. We know Fitterer and the drafting a guy, draft and develop. I don't know. I'm not sure they're as nuts at this point about bringing in a veteran quarterback. They might get there. But Matt Rhule, I thought was interesting last week. In no uncertain terms, when asked this question, he said, look, we talked about upgrading and improving the position. And so he said, with that in mind, I don't know how we can say no at this point to a veteran quarterback. And that, again, but is he the only guy screaming out for it? Or are they in agreement on that point? I don't know. I think we'll find out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things play out because I just look at it because you talk about it too. Jimmy Garoppolo, if he can't throw until August, obviously that's not ideal, but getting the mental reps and learning the offense is important. It's not anything different than what Sam Darnold's been doing throughout this offseason since they hired Ben McAdoo, because it's only been about a month since they've actually been allowed to start the offseason program and actually be there in the building and play together and then work out. So we'll see how it pans out. Do you get any sense of what their preference would be of the guys available? Because we talk about Baker, we talk about Jimmy, and obviously Baker, that was close to trying to get a deal done there. And even Nick Foles is out there. Is any preference that you've been able to find in the building within those guys that I just brought up there?
I don't know. It kind of depends on who you talk to. I've heard some that seem to be more in the Baker camp, some more Jimmy. The one thing is if you start looking at Garoppolo, David Tepper's already been through a veteran quarterback in the person of Cam Newton, coming off major throwing shoulder surgery. Yeah. And so he might need more convincing on Garoppolo, even though to me, Garoppolo, he's been in a Super Bowl. We can go back and forth on being him.
I think he probably fits better here than Baker Mayfield, if we're being honest.
I got to do too. If it's my decision, I'm probably going Garoppolo, except for the shoulder thing, which is not insignificant, especially, like I say, David Tepper got here just in time to see the bad Cam, or at least, 2018. He had half a season with a healthy Cam, then the Thursday night game at Pittsburgh. So Tepper's going to be, look, I've seen this act before. You better really convince me with his medicals.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you're also going to trade for a lesser player than what Cam. I mean, Cam was an MVP, and Garoppolo, while he's been able to take a team to the Super Bowl and then a couple months ago helped him get to the NFC title game, he's not on the level, as we all know, of Cam Newton. Now, one thing that was sort of a story, but I always kind of looked at it as a non-story. Brian Burns was absent last week during voluntary workouts. Matt Rhule said this weekend during rookie minicamp that he was doing a family matter. He expected to be back soon. Well, soon was just past Monday. And there were some thoughts out there that, hey, maybe, he's coming off a Pro Bowl season. He's played 3 years. They picked up his fifth-year option. Might he want a new contract? Now, I've looked at it as like DJ Moore. They picked up his fifth-year option. He played his fourth year. They extended him. I think that should be the same case with Brian Burns. Do you think there's any kind of movement there with his camp and the organization and trying to get a deal done now, especially for the Panthers, trying to get him ahead of a potential, let's say, if he gets another Pro Bowl season, $20+ million per year deal?
Well, I think his camp, the player's always going to want to get that guaranteed money as soon as he can. And the fifth-year option does guarantee. So, but yeah, I think if it's up to Brian Burns, let's do the deal sooner rather than later. I don't know that the Panthers are going to get there. They did that with Christian McCaffrey. They did lock up Christian after his third year. And so two things. One, the dynamics of the organization were a little weird there because they had just cut ties with Cam and Olsen. Luke had just retired. McCaffrey was like the only face of the franchise type player still standing. So I think drove Marty Herney. That's the other point. It was Marty Herney that did that deal, not Scott Fitter. So I think Fitter probably showed us his preference last year, as you said, or earlier this year, with DJ and letting him play, DJ Moore, letting him play his fourth season, then extending him. That's probably what we're looking at here with Brian Burns.
Hell, you could probably say the same thing about Dante Jackson and more notably Taylor Moton, who they had the franchise tag before they were able to get that deal done before July 15th deadline last year. So, I think that's the smartest way, at least for the organization. And I hope that Brian Burns, and I would expect that he likely will re-sign here and be here for as long as he wants to be here. And of course, as long as the organization wants him here, as it's a two-way street. Just looking at some other things too with this team. And I want to go back. I saw the report last week, they're eyeing Sean Payton. I talked to Roman Harper here on the show a couple days ago. Roman, who obviously knows Sean, even talked about the Drew Brees and Peter King putting that out there. And Drew's tweet clearly was not serious. If anyone just read it and recognized that he brought a pickleball in the senior golf tour along with coming back and playing football. Like, clearly he's not being serious about that. But Roman's saying he saw no chance in hell that Sean Payton comes to be the Carolina Panthers head coach. Have you been able to get any insight on how real that report really was? Because Mike McCarthy of Front Office Sports stands by it. And he, of course, tried to talk to some Panther spokesperson and tried to talk to Sean Payton's people. No one responded, but he heard something from somebody. And I've seen some of his reporting in the past. Usually it's about TV deals and stuff, but he's been kind of spot on.
Here's what I think. Do I think David Tepper has a lot of respect and would like to hire Sean Payton down the road? Yeah, I do. But I think a lot of other owners would too. And so is he eyeing him? Yeah, probably. But that's a long way from getting to there. And I'm not saying Mike McCarthy reported that. He didn't. In terms of it being a done deal I don't think Payton will end up here either, much like Roman said. You know why. He would be going to a division rival, so the Saints would have to sign off on that. Tepper would have, but in addition to whatever money Tepper would pay him, which that isn't the problem where your $17 billion owner is concerned, it would be draft picks that you would have to compensate the Saints for because this would amount to a trade with Payton. So, and then on top of that, Sean Payton would have to want to come here. And
yes,
made this franchise, unless he really wanted to stick it to the Saints, but it doesn't seem like he really left the Saints on bad terms. I think he's just hitting a refresh button. I don't think he'll be here, but it doesn't make that story untrue. I think David Tepper and a lot of other owners, a handful at least, Jerry Jones included, would love to hire Sean Payton.
Yeah, and Dallas is definitely the team that you look at, and they've already talked to their coach there too, and who's also has the same name, Michael McCarthy, who's been like, oh, well, we'll see what happens, but I'm not really worried about that kind of reporting. And yeah, of course they're looking to see if he would have any interest. But I get back to what Scott Fitter talked about, trying to protect draft picks. You've already given up a 6th-round pick and a 3rd-round pick to New England next year in 2023 and very likely would have to get either a first or a second round pick. Then you're putting yourself back in the same hole that you put yourself in this past draft. And you can't continuously do that if you're trying to build this roster here in Carolina, especially if the quarterback position is not figured out. And there's some other holes on this roster. Now, a couple more here, because I do want to ask you about Shi Smith and Damian Wilson. Before that, the 5-year plan. I had never heard anything about that until David Tepper came out of hiding a couple weeks ago before the draft and talked about when I brought Matt here, it's up of 5 years. And now Matt's talked about that. Had you heard that at all up until the last couple weeks? Because that's a little surprising to me, because I understand it's a rebuild and all that, but still 5 years?
Yeah, actually, Tepper did mention that, believe it or not, the day Rhule was announced at the practice bubble.
Huh.
And hell, back in January or December, Rhule talked about Jay-Z and the 7-year plan. So
Yeah.
they've actually cut it down from 7 to 5. But yeah, listen, the point I think Tepper was making, I mean, they should stop talking about 5-year rebuilds. Like,
Please.
didn't take the Bengals that long. It took them, what, 2?
Yeah.
They got the number 1 pick. I get it. But even without the Bengals, every year there are examples. The Browns with Stefanski in his first year went to the playoffs. I mean, you don't need a 5-year ramp up to be successful in this league. You need smart drafting. You need smart personnel decisions in free agency. And you got to coach them up. And frankly, the personnel decisions at quarterback here have been bad since Matt Rhule got here. I mean, they were determined that, and I don't think it was a bad idea to move on from Cam Newton with the shoulder, which we already discussed. But then to go 0 for 2 basically with Bridgewater and Darnold, I mean, you're asking for trouble as a head coach in the National Football League when you miss that badly at such an important position as quarterback. So, I mean, I don't think they might go 1 for 3. I mean, maybe if they go get Baker or Garoppolo, but neither of those guys, as you know, they're not a franchise guy either.
No, it's not the long-term answer is just not here right now. It might be.
That's right.
Now, and that's the biggest issue.
Could they buy Rhule another year? Yeah, that they could do. And maybe within that rebuild, again, I don't like even the concept, but making the playoffs is never a bad thing. And for an owner who's never done it since buying the team, I think he's getting a little antsy too, despite all the preaching about patience.
Yeah, that was the key word that he used a couple weeks ago prior to the draft. And it's just kind of wild to me. An organization that's had 27 seasons and never back-to-back winning seasons, never that consistent winning outside of what the 4 out of 5 years of Ron Rivera took this team to the playoffs. It's just crazy to hear David Tepper, the richest owner in the NFL, now bring up this 5-year plan that he told Matt Rhule about. I think people are pretty sick and tired about the 5-year plan, especially when you talk about the continuous mishaps at the quarterback position. Let's close on this. Do you have any insight on what's going on with Damian Wilson, the Panthers linebacker, and with Shi Smith, the 6th-round draft pick or 5th-round draft pick, whatever it was, out of South Carolina last year, who are both dealing with legal issues and what their status might be moving here throughout the rest of the offseason?
I don't get the impression that the Panthers are planning. I mean, there might have been some in-house stuff that happened, but they're both on the roster. And anytime I've asked Rhule or Fitter about it, it sounds like, they're going to let the legal process play out. And I think both of them, if they're not on the roster in week 1, I think it'll be performance related, not because of any sort of arrest or legal situation.
Okay, because especially at linebacker, that's a position you look at, and if Wilson's not available, that they're in trouble as far as just with depth-wise. They might have got Brandon Smith out of Penn State, and Amari Barno is more of a edge rusher, but they don't have a ton of depth, which was an issue last year behind Shaq Thompson, and I would imagine that Corey Littleton, the free agent who came over from LA or Las Vegas, would also be one of the guys that they look at. So interesting to see how that all plays out down the road. But Joe, thank you as always for your time, man, and your insight on the Carolina Panthers. Folks, make sure to follow him on Twitter again at Joseph Person, and to check out all of his articles over at The Athletic. If you're not subscribed, I have no idea what you're doing. Like, The Athletic is fantastic, not just his Panthers coverage, but all the coverage across the NFL, the NBA, college football, college basketball, and all the sports out there, even soccer. I'm a big Liverpool fan. I can check out everything that's going on with Liverpool over there with their writer for The Athletic. So great jobs that they do over there. And again, make sure to follow him on Twitter at Joseph Person. Joe, thanks for your time, man. Hope to see you soon here over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. You're buying me a beer next time I run into you at a Knights game or at the Thirsty Beaver.
Absolutely. And I hope it's at the Thirsty Beaver, my favorite place in this city. All right, man. Take care. I'll take a quick pause here in Locked On Panthers, and we'll be right back. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, great conversation there with Joe Person from The Athletic. Again, follow him on Twitter at Joseph Person. Does a great job covering the Carolina Panthers, has all the insights, and one of the fine beat reporters that we have here. We have a lot of great people covering this team and great people who come on the podcast. So glad to have Joe on once again. So again, go ahead and subscribe to The Athletic. They have more than just Panthers coverage. They have everything, sports coverage, whatever you want. They got it, and they have the insights for you. So go ahead and do that right now. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, make sure to watch the show and subscribe to the show over here on YouTube. You never want to miss a live stream episode, but if you do, that's okay, because I put all the live streams and all the recorded shows like this show over on all the traditional podcasting platforms. So whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, Stitcher, whatever one out there, you just have to rate, review, and subscribe, and you'll be able to get every single episode. You'll never miss a show of Locked On Panthers. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where every single Friday, like tomorrow, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions. Just leave a comment on today's show over on YouTube or at me at Julian Council. DM me at Julian Council, and I'll get to your questions on tomorrow's show. So in the meantime, stay safe, be cool, as we're getting up there in high 90s, as apparently I'm your local weather reporter, and keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Friday.